Thank you all for coming. I'm really quite excited about today. You may not believe it, but I started the NHS an awfully long time ago, just as first-rate foundation trusts were coming into existence, and the trust I joined was a combined acute community and mental health, and there were 3 people in the information department. And at the time I used to look at the finance department and think, gosh, they've got their exams, they've got their career paths and everything else, and we really ought to do something for ourselves. It's taken a while, there have been a few iterations, but I came across Marcus 6 months ago at a meeting, heard about APHA and thought this actually sounds really, really exciting and I'd like to find out more and spread the message. So that's where today has come from. Thank you to Marcus and to Paul for coming down and to tell us about this.
Yeah, so let's crack on. So just so I get a feel for who's in the room, who's here from a provider organisation? And commissioners? Okay, how many analysts in the room? How many non-analysts in the room then? Okay. You're a non-analyst, not an analyst. Okay. Okay. So AphA then. So AphA has been around since 2012, and it was like most good ideas. It happened one afternoon in a pub, and me and a friend of mine had both recently been appointed to heads of BI roles. On the back of the reorganisation before last, I think. And so we were both, well, how do we know that the teams that we're picking up are fit for purpose, good enough to do the job, how are they going to do it, and all that sort of stuff. And like Duncan, I've been around the NHS for a number of years and had been involved in SHA analytical networks and something called the Performance Information Reference Group, and something called, who remembers UK CHIP? Remember that? Yeah, who remembers with any fondness? No, okay. So I was frustrated by the whole thing. So we thought, well, why don't we just do something about it? And so we organised an event in Taunton in that winter where the Somerset levels flooded and we had all of that horrible weather. And so we were in Somerset County Cricket Ground with water pouring in through the roof and all that sort of stuff, and 200 analysts turned up from across the southwest. So that kind of was indicative of the level of interest in doing something on this agenda. So, we work in a heavily regulated sector already, so if you're a nurse or a doctor or an AHP or an accountant or solicitor, you'll be used to the whole professionalism agenda. You'll kind of know how it works. For analysts, there are no requirements to be a member of any professional organisation. There's no requirement for you to be able to demonstrate any professional competencies. And certainly when I started life, you became an analyst when somebody said, can you open Excel, and you didn't run out of the room screaming in horror. So who'd be quite happy to be dispensed drugs from this chap? Probably not many of us. I've just had spinal surgery, and thankfully my surgeon didn't quite look as attractive as this chap. But we've moved on quite a lot over the years in terms of standards and competencies in the sector within which we all work. So that was a bit more like what my theatre was like when I had surgery. This chap looked like a dentist I used to go to when I was a young boy. I'm not being funny. When you had brake blocks stuck in your mouth on bits of chain and you were given all sorts of horrible gas things and woke up with a mouthful of blood, and your mum was kind of cuddling you because it was all very traumatic, and you had all your teeth out and you were 5. Thankfully, we've moved on a bit from those days as well, and hopefully you'll all recognise that's where we are. But in terms of analytics, it feels like we're still back in the dark ages a little bit in some places. Not all, but some. So, if you go on now onto any sort of website now and you want to find a reputable builder, hopefully you won't end up with this guy putting your shelves up or doing your extension. And you won't have that chap doing your accounts when you go self-employed, when you come towards retiring at the end of your NHS career. So all of those people kind of are regulated and in one way or another. So as I said, back in the old days, this was kind of the equation which happened for most people in terms of analytical competencies is, can you use one of these? And if the answer was yes, or if you're as old as me, it was Ball and Pro or Lotus Notes or whatever it was before Excel, then you kind of got a job. And that can't be good enough, and it can't be right in a modern world. So how do our non-analytical chums kind of think of us in terms of the perception of analytics and analysts? And if I describe you beautifully in this slide, I apologise, but this is how people think of us generally. So they kind of think we all look like that as kids and kind of grew up all a little bit odd. We're like this as teenagers. We've all got one of those on the desk. We can all quote verbatim from that because we watch it every weekend. And like Robert Plant, read that every summer and can quote great chapters of it to anybody who's interested. There is a perception that we're kind of in that cupboard, kind of slightly nerdy, bit odd, not quite sure does one have anything to do with them, don't really kind of get them. And to be honest, some of our analytical chums perpetuate the myth because it's quite useful. I know some analysts who I would never let out of the cupboard to speak to a human being and would quite happily just throw in raw broccoli every week and just say, do some work for me. And they're happy doing that as well. But I think we need to move away from that. So there can't be anybody on the planet who's not seen Friends at some point on some repeat. Anyway, who knows what Chandler Bing's actual job was? Not the one that Rachel said he was, but the one what was his actual job? Does anybody know? So if I say to my wife, and I've been married 40 years and worked for the NHS for most of those, what do I do for a living? So I don't know, something to do with IT, printers, something like that. She has no idea. So anybody know what he did? Does everybody remember the episode with the quiz? Okay. So so what is Chandler Bing's job? It's something to do with processing our numbers. He carries a briefcase because that's clearly really, really important if you're in one of these roles. It has something to do with transponding. And then Rachel goes, oh, he's a transponster. And then they lose the flat, and it's, you've seen it anyway. So his actual job was the head of statistical analysis and data reconfiguration, which is why nobody can ever remember what he did. But I'm interested in this term of transponster, because for me it's as useful a term to describe what we do as analysts. And it's become such a generic term in terms of what that means. Who remembers world-class commissioning? Mark Britton, all of that sort of stuff. In that, there was a Band 9 role called Analyst. And that analyst his job was to support the board in all of their decision-making and bring all of this information together, make some sense out of it. Marcus and I went on a visit to a hospital not a million miles from here, really, to do an assurance visit around information. And they have, I didn't know we still had Band 2 posts, but they had Band 2 and Band 3 posts call themselves information analysts who were doing nothing of the sort at all. They were simply cutting and pasting and copying stuff from one spreadsheet to another. That's not analytics at all. So we have that whole range of stuff. And if you type analyst into Wikipedia, you'll get a whole list of stuff, handwriting analyst, colour analyst, whatever one of those is, psychoanalyst, all sorts of analytical things. So I think it's become a meaningless term out of context. So we may as well call ourselves transponsters, to be honest. So, anyone can do information, it's a doddle, because we've all got Excel on our laptops and we can just open it up and put some numbers in the thing and we can analyse stuff, because, I did O-level Excel. Apparently there's such a thing now, isn't there? I can drive a spreadsheet so I can do analytics. That's the whole kind of thing about it. But what is an analyst? What does it mean to be an analyst? And what skills do you need to become one? And who dreamed about becoming an NHS information analyst when they left school. Who went to the careers master and said, Mr. whatever he is, Brown, I want to be an NHS information analyst. He went, fantastic choice, well done. There's a career in front of you and you'll be a happy bunny. I would suggest absolutely nobody. And most of us, unless you're fortunate, have fallen into this almost by happenstance or being around or seeing an opportunity and thinking I've got a skill set which fits something. So if you are one, what does your career pathway look like? So if you're in finance and you get a job as a training post and then you get a job as this, you go, oh, I need to work in commissioning, I'll go and work in that CCG over there for a year or two, and then I need to go and work in a provider thing, I'll go and work over there for a little while, and you kind of work your way up. If I say to the accountants, who's the head of finance in the NHS, they'll all go, it's that person there. They'll know who it is. We're just about to change, and I can't remember his name now, Julian, somebody who's coming from the MOD, works in nuclear. But before that, when it was Paul Baumann or when it was Bob Alexander, people knew who it was. Who knows who the chief analyst is? Hands up. Who knew we had a chief analyst? No, exactly. The thing is invisible. The whole thing's invisible. So, career pathways non-existent. And there is a perception that we are the people who put anal into analysis. It is as boring and as dull as ditch water, and why would you ever want to go anywhere near it? And when I talk to some of my chums around this thing, that's how they view analytics. So, how do we change some of that? So you'll see there's some dolphins on your thing. By the way, there's some pens and cups and bits and pieces. I'd rather not take any of it back to Taunton, so please just take it home with you. I really don't want to take it back again. So why did we pick up on the dolphin as the symbol for the organisation? Well, because you are highly intelligent as a group of people and individually, of course you are. That's why you're in analytical jobs. You are masters of your own environment generally. People outside won't understand any of your world or how it works. You can struggle to see the outside of it sometimes. Generally true. And this is the thing for me, find it difficult to communicate with human beings. Or they find it difficult to communicate with you because there's a whole language barrier stuff going on. You know, I remember once when I was at an SHA and I had the temerity to put a p-value calculation of a test in a board report and got hauled in front of the chief exec and just, you know, needless to say, I didn't do it again. But it's just because we don't talk the same language, don't understand what we're talking about. So, who could describe a career pathway within their organisation for an analyst? Anybody? Okay. So, I kind of think it looks a little bit like this if you're trying to navigate it. So you kind of start off down here. So how do you get to here if that's where you want to be? Well, unfortunately for a lot of people, it's by having your bottom in that chair longer than the person sat next to you. And when that job gets vacated, you get put into that post. It's a bit kind of dead man's shoes. There's an element of that. So it's not really done on merit or competency. How do you get to be up here? How, if you want to work in population health, so with the whole explosion of STPs now, there's a lot of work going on around how do we skill up our analytical workforce to do things like epidemiological type analyses to support a lot of that work. At population health management level, how do you get yourself up there? So most of us kind of have carved out a career through sheer bloody-mindedness or benign cunning, to be honest, and just to kind of have been opportunistic along the way. But I remember when I very first started, I started life as a research statistician in oncology, and then ended up in information when I moved out of the research world. But there was, you know, there was no thought for where next or what's the next role or how do you progress. And to be honest, a lot of my progression around through that has been as a result of of reorganisations of the NHS, and then kind of opportunities arise and you apply for something else which looks quite interesting. But there's no plan to it, there's no structure to it. So what do analysts need, and what do analysts need to do? So as I said, we don't have a chief analyst at the moment. For those of you who are interested, the former chief analyst was a lady called Lorraine Hawkins, who now works at the World Bank. And before that was a chap called Richard Murray, who's now the head of the King's Fund. So those were the sorts of the level of chief analyst we're looking for. I've long argued that we should have a chief analyst on every trust board across the country, because we've now created an infrastructure where we're having chief information officers or chief clinical information officers, which, and I'm not being pejorative to people who work in IT, but if you want to look after boxes and wires and all that sort of stuff, that's great. But we should be the people who are consumers of information provided from that infrastructure, which we add intelligence and thoughtful analytics tools that provide the tools for people to make proper evidence-based decisions. So I think we need a bit more visible leadership across analytics, and part of what AphA is about trying to raise the profile of this element of the workforce. Invest in the right technology. Who's held of the Health Tech Advisory Board? So the Health Tech Advisory Board is chaired by somebody from your part of the world, actually, a chap called Ben Goldacre, who some of you may have seen on the telly. He's a medic from Oxford, and he kind of writes some of those, those sort of medical observational funny books that people kind of come to from time to time. There was one out recently by somebody else called This Is Going to Hurt, that sort of stuff, if you've seen that. Anyway, he chairs the Health Tech Advisory Board for the Secretary of State, and there are various kind of luminaries on it. But they're saying things like, we need to make sure that we buy the best kit for people working in NHS. So who's got the best laptop or the best new shiny Surface Pro or the best desktop on their desk? Anybody? IT. Okay. So the people who probably need it the least. Yeah, exactly. So I think there's a recognition. I mean, some people, who work in dusty porter cabins in the back end of a car park with a steam-driven Lenovo ThinkPad from about 6 years ago, it's all a bit of a joke, to be honest. So actually, I didn't create the slide, Marcus did, but I used to have one of those back in the day on my desk, when you used to have to make business cases to get an email account and all that sort of stuff. But we should be, we shouldn't be scratching around for decent kit, which in the scheme of things now is pretty cheap in terms of things. We should do enough analysis and no more. I think we still suffer, or I think the decision-making element of organisations still suffer from what we call analysis paralysis. So there's that element of, could you just run the numbers again? Could you just do this? Could you just do that? Can you cut it by this specialty? Can I have a look at it by that? All of that, the only reason they ask for that is because then, whilst that's going on and you're beaving away doing stuff which they probably won't ever really look at, is they don't have to make a decision. So it's just a way of offsetting some of that stuff. And I think we see a lot of that going on. Certainly at national level, I see an awful lot of that. So we overthink things, we overanalyze things. There's a drive now for having much, much more contemporary data. So if only I knew what was going on in A&E right now, I could make a decision about this. Well, it's a complete load of tosh. Makes no difference at all. But that seems to be where they've got themselves now. And certainly from us, daily sit reps, and people say, oh, I need it more than daily. So, but you're in the centre, in an office in bloody Elephant and Castle. What are you going to do about knowing what's happening in Bucks in their A&E department? Bugger all. So why the clamour for more and more contemporary? It makes no sense to me at all. But that doesn't stop people asking for it. We were talking before this about the explosion under the old Secretary of State for dashboards. there was an epidemic of dashboarditis, if you like, and everything would be cured by having yet another dashboard and yet another dashboard. And let's have 7 dashboards on RTT and 16 dashboards on A&E, and let's have another 6 on diagnostics, because then we'll really know what happened yesterday with absolutely beautiful clarity, and we can't affect the past, so what's the point? Dashboards, don't get me wrong, dashboards have a place, but I think we need to be moving the dial into more prescriptive and predictive analytics and skilling up the workforce to say, do you know what? A lot of this now, upstream stuff, is indicative of a problem in X amount of time. You need to be looking at doing some of the more early warning stuff. And there are lots of tools around for doing that, but we need to invest in you guys and make the time to invest in you guys to be able to do that. And when you're running around, you know, head down, backside up, pedaling furiously, because it's all urgent and important, people aren't making time to do that part of the work. And I think we just need to pull them up sharp a little bit on some of that stuff. And I think as a community, as a group, we need to go beyond the numbers. Those of you who are of a certain vintage will remember the Babel fish from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Come in. And when the great big machinery was posed a question, and it went off for months and years, I can't remember what it was, millennia to think about it, it came back and the answer was 42. And he said, well, what does that mean? He said, well, the answer's 42. And he said, I know, but what does it mean? He said, well, it means you asked the wrong question. And we get a little bit like that with some of this stuff. I see people who churn analytics out and go, well, that's what you asked for, so that's what you got. Whereas actually what we should have been having was a much more open dialogue with people at the beginning to say, is that actually the most pertinent question that you should be asking of these data? Because if it's not, then you need to do something different. So all of that really is the kind of background and history of why AphA came into being and what continues to motivate and drive us to change it going forward. And Marcus, I'll hand over to Marcus in a moment to tell us a bit more about who we are and what we do and how we're trying to affect all of that sort of stuff. But is that a world that you recognise? There's quite a lot of kind of nodding from that. Okay. Because that's the reality of how it feels for me as well. Marcus.
Cheers. Hi everyone, my name is Marcus Albano. I'm Company Secretary for AphA, and I'm Head of Analytics for NHS Improvement pre the collision with NHS England, so I'm not quite sure what my title will be in a few months' time, potentially something different, but at the moment that's what my title is. So I'm going to tell you a bit, as Paul said, just a bit about AphA and what we're about, and a bit about the membership, and then I'll also talk a little bit about FedIP as well at the end of the presentation. So to start with, who are we? So we're an association of public sector analytical staff who are working in the healthcare sector. We were formed in 2012 by a group of enthusiasts keen to promote the role and profile of the health and social care analysts. And recently, in 2018, we've become a KIC, a community interest company, which I think has been a really important step for us. So some of these bullets I've put into bold just to, as they're slightly more important than some of the others. So this one's quite important. So we're an association in our own right. We're not attached or affiliated to any other organisation. And this is quite important. If we look at how many reorganisations we've been through for the NHS, if we were to align ourselves, so I come into working with Paul, and the organisation was formed from SHA to TDA, the Trust Development Authority. If that point we had aligned against the TDA, there's subsequently been a merger with Monitor, which we've become NHS Improvement, and now we're going through a separate collision with NHS England. So what we've done is we've made sure that we're not affiliated with any other organisation. We are completely standalone. We've got approximately 600 members now. And we've got branches in these areas, so the South West, South London, East Midlands, Wales, North West, Yorkshire and Humber. Scotland has been a challenge, I have to say. We have got a branch in Scotland. It's been difficult. We have got a very different culture, but we do have a branch in Scotland as well. We're trying to work with them. And as Paul mentioned at the start, we're setting up currently, as we speak now, in Northern Ireland, and we're about to launch in the West Midlands as well. So we've got quite a few branches of AphA. And again, this one's quite important as well. We're primarily funded by membership subscriptions. We've had a small grant from the Health Foundation and sponsorship as well. But it is quite important. And what we're trying to do as much as possible is to have the organisation completely funded by member subscriptions. Okay, so what are we trying to achieve? So we're trying to support analysts that are working across the healthcare sector. We're trying to promote best practice, innovation amongst all NHS staff involved in analysis and interpretation of data. Really important, support professional and personal development, one of our key ambitions. To promote high standards in healthcare analysis, to promote and develop and recognition for healthcare analysis in professions, and I'll talk a little bit later about the AphA Awards, the Dolphin Awards that we've got, which you'll be able to see. Again, really important, develop links with other analytical professional bodies and mutual benefit and synergy, and develop a truly national representative association. And finally, this almost seemed a bit of a pipe dream, if I'm perfectly honest, when we first formed. And I think actually we're getting closer to this point where what our ambition as an organisation is to only have registered licensed analysts to operate in the NHS health and social care system for standardised levels and skills, regardless of what organisation or type of organisation you work for. Unless you're registered and licensed, you can't operate in the NHS as an analyst. That's ultimately what our goal is. Okay, so what are the benefits for members of the association? So the membership brings many benefits around sharing experiences and knowledge, promote the highest standards of healthcare analysis. So what do you get for your membership? Discounts to annual conference at members rate. This year, our annual conference is in Manchester. Last year we were in Cardiff and we've been in Taunton. So we're trying to move the annual conference around the country. So obviously, as Paul mentioned at the start, we were formed in the Southwest. What we're trying to do is show that we're not just an organisation that is based in the Southwest, and that we've got representatives across the whole country and other countries now as well. Okay, so the website, another benefit. aphaanalyst.org, and there's news, book events, you can source material, there's a members area as well in there. There's all sorts of resources available within that website. We've invested quite a lot of money recently into the website, so we're upgrading that. The launch for the new website is going to be coming in April, so there's going to be lots of new features, etc., coming into that. The newsletter, so there's some newsletters on the table if you'd like to have a look through and see some of the things that we're doing at the moment. And there's regular articles and all sorts of things from analysts and from the regions, all the training sorts of things that we're putting on. Again, access to online resources. So there's things like SAS edition. You can download SAS if you're a member of AphA through the website. The awards, which I'll talk about a bit later. So for work and talented recognition for the annual awards. There's the opportunity to shape your own profession, again, really important. And investing in the long-term educational development of analysts. And recently we've appointed a president of the organisation, Martin Pitt, who is an associate professor at the University of Exeter. So it's just showing our intent in terms of what we're trying to do, how we're trying to get into academia, train and develop the individuals as well. Okay, so benefits continued. What else have we got? Workshops. So AphA members receive priority bookings for any technical workshops that we're putting on. We've got regional meetings, such as this and others on the branches, which I've put up on the screen. So like-minded professionals there, guest speakers, share knowledge, develop networks, etc., etc. So what have you missed so far? So we've already, for last year, for 2018, as you can see, for the branches across the country and the locations and all of the events that we've put on. So there's all range of different things that we've been putting on around discrete modelling, stuff on Power BI and Tableau. We've done stuff on unscheduled care, loads of events already that have all free, sorry, don't mention all free, events that have been put on. That was just in 2018. Okay, so even more benefits. So investment in training in 2019. So what's coming? So we've got a selection of both soft skills and technical skills now for training for 2019. We've got John Varlow, who some of you may know, who's at NHS Digital. He was the director of Analytics, wasn't he, at NHSD? He was, yes, NHS Digital. And we've also purchased some time from Hugh Davis, who's providing some of the more soft skills, so influencing, communication skills, coaching and development, presentations, all of those sorts of things, so some of the softer side of skills. And they're, as you can see, are running throughout all of 2019. So we've got March, April, May, June, all the way through. So, and we're also looking at potentially purchasing even more training and development for 2019 and 2020 and beyond. So it just shows a bit of our intent in terms of what we're trying to do for the membership. Okay, so the next one is just a bit about the AphA Awards, which you may have seen. So these are the awards that we created back in 2012 when we formed the organisation. These are actually quite magnificent when you see them in real life. They're on wooden plinths, and they're actually, the dolphins are custom made. They're like a resin, aren't they, Paul? I think they're like a resin material. And then obviously you get the plaques on the front. We describe your name on the front of them if you were a winner of one of those 3 awards. So what are the awards? So we've got Analyst of the Year. So in Cardiff in 2018, it was Adam Watkins. Analyst Team of the Year, which was Devon Partnership, won in 2018. And the biggest contribution for patient care, again, NHS East Devon CCG. So you can see there's a bit of a southwest slant on there, but it's just in terms of what applications come in terms of who put an application in for one of those awards. Really important, so the application submissions are assessed and the awarded by an independent panel, so it's got nothing to do with any of the directors of the organisations. It's completely independent. And it's great exposure for analytical teams as well. So we make a big thing in terms of these awards. We do the presentation obviously at part of the national conference when it's done, so the awards are handed over. But then the directors, or one of the directors, will go to the organisation that has won the award, and we speak to the local press, and obviously they get a separate award and plaque, etc., they can put on the wall, and so it's good promotion for the analytical teams within the providers. It's something that we're quite proud of, and the individuals winning the awards are very proud of as well. Okay, so analysts are obviously vital in the age of data, and we need you. So what we've coined a phrase in terms of AphA champions. So what we've got at the moment as well as our regional, our branches, we've asked for individuals that are keen to drive the analytical, the professional development of analysts in trusts, if they're happy to do so, and drive the message for us, be a champion, look for speakers and areas that they think there would be interest of other analysts in other organisations in that local community, so we can drive some of that message through. So if you are interested in becoming an AphA champion, please speak to me and Paul afterwards, and we can certainly set that up and get you going. So that was AphA as an organisation. There is also a separate arm that we've got, which is FedIP. So I'm not sure if anyone has heard of FedIP. It's the Federation of Informatics Professionals. Paul here is the chair of FedIP. So what is FedIP? It's an awarding body, and it's got a number of organisations that sit within FedIP. So we've got BCS, CLIP, IMRAM and AphA, the 4 organisations that sit awarding bodies. And what they actually do is they provide professional registration for analysts or for information management or librarians, depending on what organisation that you're representing within one of the awarding bodies. And in terms of FedIP, we've got one, and we've only currently got one practitioner that's registered, and that's Paul himself. And we've only got one assessor, which is Glenn Howard, who's a director on the AphA board. So what we're currently doing is we are going through assessor training. So I think we've run 2 different assessor sets now. So we're training the assessors, and once we've got all the assessors trained, we're going to start to push the AphA members, to push the message that we want the AphA members to become registered professionals. So FedIP will provide that registration, and you will become a professional within the industry through FedIP. There are 4 levels that you can become registered against under FedIP, and they are a senior practitioner, advanced practitioner, and leading practitioner are the 4 levels that you can become registered under FedIP. And this is just to show some of the competencies, which all of this is available on our website. You can download, you can have a look through all of the details of this. So this just shows what you need to do at each level to achieve each of the practitioner levels in order to gain one of the statuses of registration under FedIP. Okay, and that was all from me. Okay.
Thanks, Marcus. So on the registration stuff, the other thing I would say is it's not just about technical skills and competency, it's about being a kind of an analyst in the round. So there's a requirement to demonstrate all of the kind of softer skills stuff as well, depending on the level that you're working at. And the next kind of part of the puzzle is to then map the training offer to the gap. So if you're at one level and you want to develop to a next level, what skill set do you need and what training is available to help you make that progression? So that's what we're doing at the moment. And as Marcus said, there's about 20 people going through the assessor training process at the moment. And then as we start to roll that out, those will be the first people who become registered practitioners. And the levels are right the way through from junior analysts right the way through to people who've kind of been in managerial roles for a number of years as well. We're looking at also creating another, if you like, kind of more entry-level stuff for people who come out of graduate training schemes. So there's now a graduate management training scheme, Analyst element, which is run by the local leadership academies as well. So we've got a number of graduates within NHS Improvement. I mean, there's some in CQC, there are some in various other parts of the system, and they do sort of proper control placements around organisations, and they come out as qualified graduate trainees, the same as the general scheme, but they have very much an analytical focus. And obviously the hope is that we're grooming those younger people now to be the leaders of the future, so to get them in. So the other thing which we're very much involved in the moment as well is advising the academic sector on the development of courses that would be attractive around master's level and apprenticeships for people who are working in the health and care sector as well. So we're doing a lot of work around that sort of stuff as well. So happy to take any questions at all, and hopefully you found that interesting and useful.
Just one question to start off with, the cost of membership.
Cost of memberships, yeah, it's an exorbitant £30, which I don't know about you, but that's not even half of a decent night out, is it? So yeah, it's 30 quid for a year. To become a registered professional is an extra £25 on top of that. Again, I still think that's amazing value for money. But yeah, so 30 quid.
Just to go back to the part about the registration, what are the timescales for that? And is that something that will become mandated?
So rollout's imminent in terms of that. So we're just putting the people through. In terms of the time element for individuals, so you have to apply as an individual, you have to almost like complete a portfolio application around some of that stuff. So the other side of it is that we're encouraging people to maintain training logs and CPD and evidence their practice as well. I did the leading practitioner one, and for me it was about a 6-hour element of gathering all of the necessary evidence to put it through for assessment. That was primarily because I had stuff on laptops all over the place. But so that's right. Will it be mandated? This is a really interesting question. We're working with Health Education England and NHS Improvement and CQC and NHS England and some of the CCGs around rationalising job descriptions and making it, certainly as a minimum, requirement in the essential column of a job description. The desirable column of a job description. We're just about to have that conversation with HR about can we move it into the essential space. I'm a bit reluctant to mandate stuff, if I'm honest. I'd rather there was a peer pressure regard of that and some leadership that says, if you're going to come and work for me, I require you to be part of this. But I think mandating it might be a few years down the line.
Given the fact that we've got agenda for change, you talk about career pathways, core competencies that you thought, so you acknowledged that in your presentation. Is there anything kind of as part of it that kind of prescribes certain levels of competence for certain jobs or roles?
Yeah, not well, we've kind of shied away from that, to be honest. I mean, a part of the rationalisation around the job description things, we did look at doing that. But then when we talked to Public Health England and when we talk to CQC and when we talk to people who are still on monitor contracts, then none of them are on agenda for change. So then you get into other thing around matching agenda for change job descriptions against other parts of the system as well. I think what we can broadly do is say, if you're operating at in the old days, we used to have 4, 5, 6 bands or 5, 6, 7 bands and doing like that, is we would expect at that level this to be a minimum set of competencies. But if you're working in a band 6 in public health part of the system, for example, you might have a slightly different set of technical skills you require than if you're working in an acute provider or a mental health provider. So it gets quite fraught quite quickly if you're not careful. So we're just trying to provide a framework to say, okay, these are the differentials between them.
Hi, you mentioned about the training report, the package of training that you're proposing for this year, and you talked about extending that and providing more training. Does that mean there'll be repeats of training courses that we may have already missed because this is already March? And if not, is there any option for those to become web-based training packages so the people who are late to the table this year could potentially do some of the training we've missed?
Yeah, so I think absolutely is the answer. So we're not just running them once. So John's stuff, the technical stuff around things like key statistical concepts, time series modelling, all of that sort of stuff, we will run on a regular basis. And we're trying to run them not just in the same locality across the country. One of the things that we are looking at is how do we create training resource which is consumable by people who don't necessarily like classroom face-to-face training. So we're looking at some of the MOOC stuff, you know, that kind of online thing, and also video vignette stuff that people can go on and just say, I just want to know about this little bit of stuff. So can somebody teach me about Mann-Whitney testing, or can somebody teach me about, and we're going to kind of chunk some of that stuff. We've got a YouTube channel which we're just kind of working that stuff up on at the moment. So all of this is quite embryonic, so, but it'll be dictated to by what the association membership wants us to do, really, and so we'll be reactive to that.
And I'm one of the people that find this exciting, so I think, I don't think the category of this is boring.
No, I you know, great. I get very excited about the whole thing. There's a lady at the back there who had a question.
Hello. I wondered how this aligns with the private sector. Obviously, you're primarily focusing this on the public sector healthcare, but obviously there is healthcare within the private sector, and how that maps across.
Yeah, we have some private healthcare providers. So we have some members who are from Virgin, who've come on board with some of this stuff. I very much said at the beginning when we set the organisation up, it was if you think you were working in healthcare analysis, you know, we were happy for you to come along and join. So it is primarily a public sector focused thing, but we do have a small number of members who are coming in from outside, and increasingly people who are working in academia are now coming in as well, as we start to see some of that kind of crossover working as well. So yeah, it's a broad range of folk who are involved, to be honest.
You talked about Exeter being sort of the academia that you were dealing with at the moment. Have you talked with any others? So, for instance, Reading, we're doing a lot of work with their academia at the moment. Historically, people like Kent and Surrey have had things in place. Yeah. So I was just wondering, were you expanding into those sort of areas?
Yeah. Yes. So I've had no direct dealings with Reading, though I'm aware that they had a very good maths and stats department, because I remember doing some training with them when I was an undergraduate. We have had conversations, and we've got quite close links with Surrey already, as well as at Imperial and UCL and various others. And through our connections through the Health Foundation as well, we're kind of quite well plugged in to some of that. The only reason for Exeter being quite so prominent is A, it's 20 minutes from my house, and B, Martin Pitt, who's the president now, runs an organisation called MASHNet, which is the Modelling and Simulation in Health Network, who were very much a kind of sister organisation from the academic world, doing something similar to what we were trying to do, and we wanted to do some cross-pollination from that part of the world as well. So MASHNet helps with some of that, and it's not just an Exeter thing. But yeah, we've been talking to Lancaster and various other organisations as well. But it's important, I think, that people who are working in localities have much more vibrant relationships with their local academic providers than perhaps we've done in the past. And, you know, we've been as guilty as that. We don't have, in Somerset where we're based, we don't have that much of a vibrant academic unit, so, you know, hence Exeter. But